to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris, and today I want to talk about a Hanukkah story in superhero comics. Hanukkah stories in comics are so rare. They're like finding a parent that's never stepped on a Lego. It's just something you don't come across very often. I remember growing up, I would come across Christmas stories in Marvel and DC every year. Without fail. Sometimes they'd even have specials, but they'd always sort of weave it into the story, you know, like Spider-Man needs to get a present for Aunt May. I don't know. It just was a thing I remember coming across a lot, and I never came across Hanukkah stories. And when you think about it, that's a little strange, because comics were largely created by Jewish people, and yet there's hardly any representation. We're going to talk about that a little bit more at the very end of the video, but until then, I came across 1981's Justice League of America number 188, which has a short Hanukkah story. So without any further ado, let's read it. The story kicks off on the Justice League's satellite. From that point, they always have someone on watch duty looking for crime or big trouble anywhere on Earth. And right now on monitor duty is Hawkman and Hawkgirl, and they're waxing nostalgic for things they remember about their old home planet. They're from an alien planet. And let's just take a moment to recognize that this artwork is actually kind of awesome. I'm not overly familiar with artist Rich Buckler. I'm gonna have to look him up. But let's take a close look at his anatomy and how dynamic things are, how great he is at shading, backgrounds, character expressions. I mean, just the full gamut. It's amazing. He's a really good artist. He reminds me something of Neil Adams, maybe Jim Aparo, both guys that were big at DC Comics. Anyway, Rich Buckler. Keep an eye on the artwork throughout this story, because it's definitely one of the high points. Hawkgirl confides in Hawkman that, in a way, I'm glad Ray Palmer asked us to take over his monitor duty tonight, at least up here, away from Earth and our spaceship both. I don't have to remember that we're so far away from home. And Hawkman eventually says, we will go back, Shiera. There's always hope. If I've learned anything from the history of humanity's people, it's that there's always hope. And of course, right then, a pink satellite starts charging at the Justice League's satellite. We now cut to Ivy Town, which is in New England, and the superhero Adam, or as he's known in his civilian identity, Ray Palmer. He's there with his wife, Jean Loring, and they're visiting an old friend of Jean's to celebrate Hanukkah. Jean Loring, now that's a troubled character. She was the Adams' wife, and 2 years from now, he would divorce her after he catches her having an affair. She'd already been driven insane back in the 60s, but then she had her sanity restored by some other crazy superhero. Just keep that in the back of your mind, because in 2004, they had her have a complete mental breakdown in the storyline Identity Crisis. Super dark and depressing, to be honest, where she accidentally murders the wife of the elongated man and tries to cover it up. She basically becomes a supervillain in that story. She later went on to get Eclipso's powers. She then died. I think she was eaten by a shark, and she was resurrected as a Black Lantern. Just really depressing, because I don't think the writers ever intended Jean to be a supervillain. It was just like the character just sort of had nothing to do, and they just dragged her through the mud. Anyway, at this point in time, she's only had one mental breakdown, and she's hanging out with her husband and some Jewish friends for Hanukkah. You must be Ray. I'm Stu Solomon. Come on in. Everyone's here. Ray Palmer points out, Stu, I hope you'll forgive me, but I'm not very religious. With us, it's more than religion, Ray. Hanukkah is a special holiday for the Jews, and for my family. You see, Hanukkah, the Feast of Dedication, celebrates the victory of the Maccabees over King Antiochus IV Epiphanes. Like Ray Palmer, I'm also not the most religious, so please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing King Antioch's name. But we're about to learn the story behind Hanukkah, and it is important to this story, so I'm going to read some of it. Stu explains that King Antiochus was trying to stamp out the Jewish faith. His defeat by the Maccabees is a reaffirmation of freedom of religion. Ray asks, and the 8 candles? You mean the menorah. It commemorates the rededication of the temple to the worship of one God by Judas Maccabeus. The Talmud tells us there was only enough sacred oil to keep the temple lamp burning for one night, but miraculously, the oil lasted for 8 days. To celebrate this, we light one candle for each evening of the festival to remind us that the light of faith will continue to grow, even if only a few of the faithful remain. Holiday miracle, the oil lasted for 8 days when it should have only lasted for one. That's the important part to remember. We'll come back to that. From there, we cut to a subplot that has no bearing on the story, where Batman and Black Canary team up for a few pages to beat up some thieves. What are they doing? Well, let's let the thieves tell us themselves. One says, "What do you think we're gonna do with $500,000 worth of stolen computer parts in our hot little hands?" Let me assure you, they do not have hot little hands. They are hot, regular size hands. There are people with regular size hands on both sides. Batman and the thieves both have hot, regular size hands. After taking down the thieves, Black Canary tries to confide in Batman, but he doesn't seem especially interested. She says, "Ever since Green Arrow quit the Justice League, we've had some problems, Batman. I'll tell you about it sometime, but not now, all right?" "Whatever you say, Canary."
Yeah, whatever you say, Canary. I don't wear hockey pads."
Their conversation is interrupted by the JLA emergency alarm, and we see back on the JLA satellite that it's being attacked by that pink satellite, and it has disrupted their communication system and their defensive weaponry. Hawkman says, "Since our defense capability was knocked out first, I'll have to try and destroy the thing by hand." There's actually a bit of science here where Hawkman says, "Without an atmosphere to beat against, my wings are useless. Still, by using my gravity controls, I can manage to swoop and dive. But it's so clumsy, and those laser beams," and with that, he's actually shot in the arm. Nearly incapacitated by the pain, Hawkman is still able to reach the satellite. Back inside the Justice League satellite, Batman, Canary, and the Atom were all able to reach the teleport system and get to the satellite, but no other superheroes were able to get the warning. Hawkgirl explains, "We're being attacked by some sort of killer satellite. Our computers said it came from somewhere on Earth before it overloaded and blew out 5 minutes ago." Hawkman knows he doesn't have much time and just relies on pure brute force attacking the pink satellite. It explodes, knocking him out. But he's not the only one in trouble, as the Atom points out, "I hate to mention this, Shiera, but Hawkman may not be the only one of us who needs help. This used to be our life support system." Batman elaborates, saying, "Atom's saying we're trapped in a crippled space station without renewable air or heat." Black Canary adds, "And with only one working emergency spacesuit and one EVA jet sled, there's no way we can evacuate." And apparently she seems to have first dibs on that spacesuit, putting it on right away. Hawkgirl says, "Batman, Atom, try to repair the equipment. If you can hold it together for 1 hour, I'll bring a replacement unit from my spaceship." I don't know whether they're calling her Hawk Girl or Hawk Woman at this point because everybody just calls her Shiera. It is interesting to see her take control, isn't it? Batman isn't in charge, he just is taking the marching orders. It's also interesting that she's planning on getting replacement parts from her spaceship, but there's only one spacesuit, right? So it feels like they missed something there. Atom says, "There's a chance I can reconnect some of the wires manually," and Batman adds, "I'll see if I can breadboard the circuit panels. Good luck, Atom." When Batman says he's going to breadboard the circuit panels, he's not talking about suddenly baking. That would be inappropriate at this point in time. Breadboarding is where you manually wrap and plug in wires, but you don't use soldering. It's sort of like a temporary fix or maybe a prototype stage when you're putting together circuits. It makes 100% sense, but keep it in mind that he said he was going to breadboard the circuit panel. Because in the next panel, it says, "And soon, the only heat in the rapidly chilling monitor room comes from the miniature torch soldering twisted circuitry in the Batman's rock-steady hands." He just said he was going to breadboard it, and now he's actually soldering it. And honestly, I would say the first idea was a lot better, because they're running out of oxygen. I don't think soldering circuitry right now is the best option. That uses up air. You have to use oxygen to burn things. Black Canary rescues the unconscious Hawkman, while Hawkgirl flies to her spaceship in orbit elsewhere above Earth. And it's interesting how they describe that she does this. It says that Hawkgirl has to fly to her spaceship on the far side of the Earth, so she wings low, almost to the edge of the atmosphere, dangerously low. Yet only by skimming the upper reaches of the air can she travel quickly enough around the great green globe of Earth. Time seems to crawl. So she's getting really close to the atmosphere in order to use gravity to whip her around to the other side. But of course, being that close to the atmosphere means she could start to hit friction and burn up. It's dangerous. That's cool. That's scientifically based. And earlier we saw some narration boxes say that when Hawkman blew up that satellite, it was completely silent in space. Cool. Scientifically accurate. And yet, look at this picture of Hawkgirl in space. She doesn't seem to have any breathing apparatus at all. Hawkman clearly has a mask, but Hawkgirl doesn't. Just seems weird to me that they would do that. Like, the artist clearly didn't draw her with a mask on. Back in the satellite, Adam passes out, but fortunately, the life support system has turned back on. Black Canary mentions, "I got a look at the satellite that attacked us while I was out there. Apparently it was designed to shoot down spy satellites and got its programming fouled up when it came across our HQ. But the shocking thing was, it was an American satellite, Batman."
I think that's something we'll have to discuss with the Pentagon when we get back to Earth. Yes, indeed.
That's clearly a reference to Reagan's Star Wars satellite program, which would shoot down enemy missiles. Apparently, in this universe, they got that up and running really fast, but neglected to point out that the Justice League of America actually lives up there. They're kind of good guys that save our lives every once in a while. Oops. Hawkgirl makes it back with the replacement parts to get the Justice League satellite completely up and running. And Batman points out,
Shire, there's something odd here. This was the wrecked unit Adam and I repaired. Or at least I thought we'd repaired it, but look, these primary system wires were never touched.
And Adam adds, "That's what I tried to tell you, Batman. As soon as I saw them, I knew it was useless. But I tried to fix them anyway, until the cold got to me."
Adam, if you didn't repair the unit, then how in heaven did the life support system stay working all this time?
We needed a miracle, Batman, and we got one. I think I'd better tell you all a story I heard today. It's about another miracle that happened in a temple more than 2,000 years ago. Ah, see? It all tied together. Made sense. I think that that's a pretty cool little metaphor that they created. They said this is what Hanukkah is about, and they had a little miracle, an unexplained occurrence happen for the Justice League of America. It's also just interesting to see a Justice League of America story where you're not using all the big heroes. You know, there's no Superman, Wonder Woman, Aquaman, etc. That was something that in the 80s, they used a lot of supporting characters a lot of times. Batman and Wonder Woman, Aquaman, they were all still, Flash, Green Lantern, they were all still part of the Justice League, but they weren't always there. The writers seemed to have a lot of flexibility in just using whichever superheroes they felt like using at the time. It was a really fun time, although over time it became less and less popular. Fans, readers, they want to see the big names when they read Justice League. They like seeing that interaction, that interplay of the big characters, and I get that. You can get the small character arcs with the supporting cast, and then you can get the big fun action and interaction with the big name stars. Anyway, that was fun to come across a Hanukkah story. They're rare in comics. You do not see a lot of Hanukkah issues. So this was special, and it really got me thinking, why are there not more Jewish stories in comics when most comics were created by Jewish creators? Superman, Batman, pretty much the entire Marvel universe. What else? I mean, they were all created by Jewish creators. So I'm actually working on explaining just that. It's an interesting topic, and next month you can expect that episode. So that's something I'm working on now. If you celebrate Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah. If you celebrate Christmas, Merry Christmas. If you celebrate something else, cool. If you celebrate nothing, well, hopefully this video was entertaining. And until next week, keep reading comics.